Wow. I tell you, it's rare that I feel the need to report on something quite so negative. There are things that I could have reported on over the years with this channel that are certainly very negative that I just haven't. I haven't brought that to the channel. I've let other news sources talk about that. But this one, for me, is a big one. Because I know that as a collector myself, it's going to be a big one for you as well. That's the unfortunate, sad, terrible, very bad, no good news that DC Collectibles, or DC Direct as it's gone back to its antiquitous name, has been completely destroyed. It's been, some have called, a bloodbath at Warner Entertainment, Warner Brothers Media, and one of the biggest cuts, aside from all the people who are part of the editing staff for the comics, and I'll get into that in a second, aside from that end of things, it's been an absolute bloodbath for DC Direct because they've been cut right off. It no longer exists. They're done. They're kaput. Now, what does that mean for the future of perhaps the collectibles and the figures that have already been shown to us, revealed to us? Well, I would say anything that's not currently on the boat on the way over here or hasn't been manufactured as of yet, I feel like all that stuff is probably gone the way of the dodo bird. It's been flushed down the toilet with the rest of the company. That means that likely we will see the release of the wave of DC Essentials with the Rebirth Batman and Nightwing redecos, along with Sucked On Cough Lozenge Speed Force Flash and not long-haired regeneration suit Superman. They will likely be released to the public because people who are Instagram influencers like Osaka the Geek have already received their copies, their samples of those figures, and made many multiple fantastic pictorial posts about those figures. But will the DC Essentials deceased figures be released? At this point, I'm not counting on it. I wouldn't bet on it. I would take that betting money and put it somewhere else, because DC Collectibles / DC Direct over the years many times has shown us different figures, different products, and then never released them and or ended that line of figures altogether. DC Films, there were figures that never got released. DC Icons, oh my god, there were so many figures that we all really wanted. Intriguing the Demon, Booster Gold, Blue Beetle, Shazam, Deadshot, Sinestro, they never ever saw the light of day. Not to mention the more recent Luchador series. Those probably would have sold like hotcakes at a maple syrup festival as far as I'm concerned, but again, the rug was pulled out from under us, and those figures were shown and then retracted, and they never will see release. Honestly, it's things like this that, if you have your ear to the tracks, if you are nosing around in the grapevine, if you have any kind of intuition and or understanding of how business works, then these are signs that things aren't necessarily going as planned over at the offices at DC Direct. And being that they are owned by a corporation whose sole purpose is to make profit for the business while turning a profit for its shareholders, if the dollars to donuts don't add up, then they stop making the donuts. They cut their losses. That's what business is. I'm not saying I like it. It sucks. There are times when that kind of trimming of the fat is so sad and hits you on a deeper level than perhaps other businesses that you're not invested in emotionally and you don't have any of their product that don't hit you as hard. DC Direct for me does hit me harder. Now, although almost every single comic book / action figure community collecting website / forum has already reported on this, I'm just going to read you quickly something from my friend Jay over at Toy News International, and then I'll kind of close off with my final thoughts about this whole thing. News broke today that DC Comics was rocked by major layoffs being made by its parent company, Warner Brothers, which includes the likes of Editor-in-Chief Bob Harris, Senior VP of Publishing, Strategy and Support Services, Hank Canals, VP of Marketing and Creative Services, Jonah Weiland, VP Global Publishing Initiatives and Digital Strategy, Bobby Chase, Senior Story Editor, Brian Cunningham, and Executive Editor, Mark Doyle. Jay then goes on to say, beyond that, according to THR, DC Direct / DC Collectibles, which has been the in-house merchandise and collectibles manufacturer arm for DC Comics for the past 22 years, has been completely shut down. We are very saddened by this news and wish everyone who worked there all the best. And I couldn't have said it better, and I echo Jay's sentiments. We really do wish everyone all the best, and it is very, very sad. All those people have lost their livelihood, and they have to plug in their very particular set of skills in another avenue to try and continue to earn their livelihood. So as a side note, this doesn't just affect DC Direct. This really does affect DC Comics in general. It's being called an absolute bloodbath. But it's really sad for those of us as well who collect figures and statues and replicas and props and the such like, and we have for many years from DC Collectibles / DC Direct, because those days are gone. There will no longer be an in-house manufacturing arm for those high-quality collectibles. But again, this is not something that I am super surprised to hear about. Over the years, because of the influence of Marvel Legends and also DC Universe Classics, the collectors started to desire more highly articulated figures, and DC Direct was always just a little bit in the background. It always seemed like they were trying to catch up. In my opinion, it wasn't until they released their Arkham Knight line of figures and their DC Icons line of figures that it felt like, to me, they had began to, at least for the most part, commit to a more highly articulated action figure line. Even when they were operating under the banner of DC Collectibles, only some of their New 52 figures had more articulation points. The first ones actually had much less articulation than the latter ones. Add to that, you also had foreign import companies like Mafex and SH Figuarts, and the fantastic products of Mezco 1/12 Collective, and so on, now beginning to enter the market, and adult collectors were responding. I responded to that stuff as well. I'm a bit of a completionist, so I buy stuff all across the board, but some folks just pretty much jumped ship, especially after the DC Icons line was canceled. There were people who wanted the highly articulated action figures, and with DC Collectibles / DC Direct trying to answer that call with their DC Essentials line post DC Icons, they bought a few of the DC Essentials and said, nah, not for me, and they stuck with mostly the foreign imports. And hey, I get it. You could see that DC Direct / DC Collectibles wasn't having nearly as much money poured into their toys, their products, their adult collectibles. Look at the DC Essentials. Most of those figures have very, very minimal newly sculpted detail, and all of the men have been produced on the exact same male body buck. Add to that the fact that the original product, the sketches, the art based on the artwork of Jason Fabic, and then Paul Harding later making the digital product, all that went the way of the dodo bird once the articulation points were added. The characters started off being proportionately correct, and then all of a sudden had monkey arms, and a lot of collectors didn't respond well to that. And then add to that the fact that the ankles of these figures tend to get very weak very quick, and again, collectors were like, nah, not for me. And now, right up until today, we also have Spin Master releasing DC product, and more of note, we have McFarlane Toys with their DC Multiverse line, and a lot of people are buying into that. And what it comes down to is there's only so many consumer dollars that we have to spend. For some people, it's only 1 or 2 products a month. They have to be very choosing. And for others, maybe it's a few more. I know myself, I spend quite a bit because the money that I make from this channel, I put back into this channel so I can review more products. But the reality is, no matter how much you have to spend, whether it's a little or a lot, it is still a finite number. And there is a lot of competition out there. So I think what happened is DC Direct, as far as the parent company was concerned, it just wasn't making the profits they had hoped for. The financial input into the products was not being trumped by their financial gains from releasing the product. And again, they're a corporation. And even though the people who work at DC Direct care about the characters, the people above them in the high up offices don't. It's about money. And ultimately, I think that is likely the main reason why DC Direct was axed on the chopping block. So yeah, It's incredibly sad. I hate to have to report this. These are my thoughts. I could be completely wrong. There is still very limited information as to this whole situation and how it's going to develop. If anything new that is bigger news comes along regarding this, I'll make another video about it and share it with you. But at this point, this is all I know, and these are my thoughts. I feel terrible for everyone that worked there, everyone that has lost their job, whether they're the creative staff, whether they're editorial staff, whether they're people who were just doing secretarial work, whether anyone. There were all kinds of people that worked there. I feel terrible for everyone that has lost their job, and we'll just have to wait and see what happens next. Anyway, super friends, that's my story and I'm sticking to it. Hopefully you didn't enjoy this video. Feel free to get a discourse going down below with some of the other DC squad, and I will see you with the next one. Have a fantastic day, everybody, and take care.